Welcome everybody to another Torq Moto podcast from myself, Jeffro and Wobbs. We are rolling out the big hitters from British Motocross.
I'm a bit worried we're coming out too soon with all the big names and we're going to be like really struggling in a couple of weeks.
We just have to keep making stories to get them back in. We're joined by Kurt and Nicoll for this episode. Kurt, welcome. Thanks for coming out. Before we get chatting with Kurt, a bit of an announcement from you.
Well, it's not really an announcement. It's common knowledge really, but the VMXDN Fox Hill, we've now bought the Farley Castle September, which was the original VMXDN that Dave was involved with. So Dave got let go. The event, unfortunately, last couple of years has gone downhill a little bit. So now me, Dave, and Sean Copeman have bought it, and we're going to try and bring it back to not crazy numbers, but just the same as it was in like 18, 19. But it was good, you know. It's not going to be Fox Hill. We know Fox Hills books all the trends off the scale. That's great. We just want Fox Hill to be a nice riders event. And it always was a great do, and we want it to be back where it was before. So you're not looking to change it too much. Just keep it like it was. It's not, like you said, it's not going to have the whistles and bells of Fox Hill. The budget's simply not there for all the big American names. You know, that's 20 grand to bring all those guys over and hotel and everything. We just haven't got it in the budget at the moment. So we're just going to have the same team race rules as the VMXDN team race. So a lot of the guys who are racing that are coming across to race it. We've got a few really heavy hitters coming. You know, we've got your Rob Herrings and your Bobachefs, and I'm trying to get Tommy Searle in, but that's the deal to be done yet. Kurt's not coming. We won't talk about that. But we will. But we got Mark Jones and Matt Gordon, and you know, there's loads of plenty of good names coming, and it's going to be great. And
I've agreed to ride it. I'm not in that caliber, obviously, but I'm going to have a little wobble around it.
It's a nice ride round Farley.
Exactly.
Fox Hills is, you better be on your game at Fox Hill.
Yeah.
Fox Hills is a spectator track, and it's really spectacular. You can see the whole valley. It's great. It is what it is. Personally, I wouldn't want to ride Fox Hill, but that's...
Hence why I want to ride Farley.
Farley's a much more Evo-friendly circuit. The entries are all sold out. The only class that's not sold out is Twin Shock.
Yeah.
And they all moan that there's no Twin Shock racing. Well, sign up. We got 40, so it's not like there's nobody coming.
Yeah.
But hopefully by the time the gate drops, we'll have 60.
And what's the date of that one again, Wobbs? Remind us. Can you remember?
Middle of September. September 13th to 15th.
Yeah. What's that, 3 weeks after Fox Hill?
Yeah, we have to pick a date. I know it's somebody's going to be on holiday and somebody's nan's going to have died by that point. There's nothing we can do about it. But at the end of the day, there was not very much else on that date. There was no British. There's no fastest 40. I think there's a Bridgestone that we clash with, but something's going to clash all the time.
That's British Motocross.
And then we have got another announcement, which I can't tell you yet, but it's coming.
Oh, look,
it's coming.
I like that.
It's coming for 25.
You couldn't see off camera there, right? So Wobbs says stuff. What you don't see, everybody watching, and obviously those of you listening, you certainly don't see it. Charlie behind the camera is just constantly putting her hands over her eyes, going, "Don't say that, Wobbs. Don't say that."
No, my wife gives it. You keep piling bricks on your head. So yeah, we've got that going on. There's a few other things business wise. We've got some new graphics things going on. I think we're going to be importing N Style again, back like we did back in the day. Yeah,
get on.
N Style's restructuring, so we're going to do a bit of that, I think. And so we're working on that deals at the moment, and the titanium thing's off the scale, as you know.
We like to keep busy, Wobbs, don't we?
I just want to have
this gentleman.
This man is busy. Always been busy.
Yes. So Kurt, you are busy. We're going to get into that. What you're doing with your life these days, and hopefully part 2, if we can get 2 episodes out of you, we're going to try and squeeze as much out of you as we can. But going right back to the start, we've got all kinds of technical issues going on at the minute. So I just keep rolling. We got a skylight falling down.
That's going to drop down.
The world's falling in on us right now.
That's going to drop down, that is. Can't we afford tape?
No, because you're spending too much money on all the other stuff, like riders and graphics.
I've probably got some duct tape somewhere.
So, yeah, it's great to have you here. Obviously, going way back, an obvious starting point is, we ask everybody this because it is the starting point. I got a good idea what the answer is going to be this. How did Kurt Nicoll get started in motocross? Obviously, Dad was a top rider, so...
Yeah, I was brought up with motocross. Dad raced in the 60s and the 70s, and so...
Was your dad racing? Did you go to the races to watch your dad?
I did. I went to, we used to spend summers in France, and he raced in France all the time. And, we'd go to the races with him, not all the time, but sometimes. When he did the British Championships, when they first started the top 35, I went to most of those races with him. But he actually hid schoolboy motocross from me. So I didn't actually know that kids could ride motocross until I was like 12 years old. And then when I discovered that kids could ride, then I bugged him, and then I started racing schoolboys when I was 14.
That's relatively late for a father who was a professional top-level guy. I mean, where did your dad get in the World Championships? He was up there, wasn't he?
He finished 6th in 1969, and he won the Luxembourg Grand Prix in 1969. So when I won my first one in 87, we were actually the first father and son to win before Everett started winning 1,000 of them.
Yeah. That's a nice little thing to get thrown in there.
But we were first.
No, fair play. That's awesome.
Looking back then, you've had an amazing career. That seems like a real smart move from your dad, subconsciously, because some riders burn out pretty quickly. They start really young, particularly in this day and age, and they can sort of, did you think he subconsciously did that on purpose, not got you on racing so early?
Or just couldn't be asked?
Yeah, I honestly, I think he was busy.
Yeah. Is that right?
He had a business that he was running, and he was still racing himself. I mean, he raced up until 78, and I started in 79. And so I think, he didn't really have time for me to be riding as well. And then when I started, his life went downhill from there, then he was working on my bikes as well as his own bikes.
So did you have bikes, just didn't race?
I had bikes when I was 12. That's when I first had bikes, just, old farm bikes and stuff.
Yeah.
And then my first motocross bike for Christmas, like 1978.
But because, I mean, as a spectator, I just remember you riding 500s. It's like you seem to ride 500s at 12 years old.
Yeah,
it just seems like you were always on the Premier class, and that was it, straight in.
Yeah, and that was definitely a conscious decision. I mean, at that time, there was only one British Championship, the top 35. I mean, there was 125 and 250, but the top 35 was the championship.
Yeah.
And British riders rode 500s, and my idol was obviously Graham Noyce, and so it seemed totally natural to me. I mean, I came off 125 straight onto a 420 Kawasaki. I never rode a 250 at all.
That's crazy, isn't it? Because nowadays, it just, the 450 class, we can get into it later. It seems to be the premier class still, but the numbers are not there. As we sell secondhand bikes, and we can't. 450s are hard work. Mm-hmm. They're too much for most people. Whereas back in the day, the 500s was the premier class, and the 125 and 250 was very much support classes.
Yes, that's exactly how it was. And but 500s became too much for people to ride in the late 80s, and that's why it shifted to 250s in the 90s.
Yeah.
But when I first was riding 500s, I don't know, the 250s were kind of underpowered then a little bit. I raced 250s like British Championship and 125s, but they were definitely support classes. It was the 500 where you wanted to be. Interesting
that you say there that 500s became too much for people. Why do you think that was? Because up till then, it wasn't. People like yourself went straight on 125 to 500.
So they didn't get any faster. They didn't get any faster. They didn't develop them. They from 89 onwards, they didn't really.
It was a little bit. I mean, the bikes got more powerful. Like that 420 Kawasaki that I had probably had, right around 50 horsepower, which I think is ideal for
and like a light switch,
bike.
I'm sure.
But then
no power valves and it was just
the KTM that I had in 92, the last year I raced 500 and nearly 70 horsepower. And so, as they took more horsepower out of them, the rest of the bike didn't catch up, and they're beasts.
But like you say, into the 90s, the 250s improved leaps and bounds.
Yes.
So, and we experienced that with Mike Brown at Farley. Like he rode a 500 one year, and he'd never raced a 500. Mm-hmm. He said, I could ride a 250 faster. So we built him a good 250, and he was actually quicker on it. And now you'll see that's happening in the vet stuff now, is the 250 is a more popular class, because you can ride one and you can wring its neck and you can hang off the back. But from early 90s onwards, the 250 was a better bike.
Yeah.
Because that's what the factory put the development into.
That change came about, towards the late 80s. But if you go back to, when I was first doing British Championships, all the front runners were all on 500s then. Yeah. And it wasn't until late 80s that a few 250s started to creep in and get decent results. And then, by the early 90s, then the 250s were more competitive than the 500s.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we talk about, like the grading list, obviously you and Dave were not applicable on the grading list, but, there was your Brian Wheelers and your Russ Jarmans and your Stuart Coyle was all had to get Irish licenses because there was 9 guys allowed, I believe, and they was having to get. It was just like, for the 500 class was the Premier, was the class to be in.
Yeah, and British riders in the Premier class. I mean, there was a wealth of talent.
Really?
It's something which we certainly don't see today. I wish we did, and we probably won't ever see again. But when you did a British Championship in the 80s, if you could get, the guy that was finishing 6th in the British Championship, let's say someone like Mark Banks or Rob Andrews or these type of guys, I mean, they could also get 6th in a World Championship race.
Yeah.
Where now someone that gets 6th in the British Championship race isn't even going to go to a GP.
No.
So it was a different world.
But I do think we need to get back to, we're going off tangent a little bit, but I don't think it's just a British problem. You don't see, like the Grand Prix have started now, the 2 or 3 rounds in, and they've only got 25, 30 on the gate. So it's not like a wealth of French kids or a wealth of German. It just doesn't seem to be, I don't know whether the kids are into video games now, or I don't know, I understand where
but it's a different thing, because when the first GP I ever did was in Payerne in Switzerland. And it was when they first started qualifying laps. So not just grading lists, but qualifying laps. And there was the top 10 were already pre-qualified. And there was 3 groups of 40 qualifying for the other 30 positions, 120 riders in the 500 GP. So, of course, you could send 8 riders, 10 riders. I mean, now nobody qualifies. You have 25 guys and they're pre-selected. So completely different world.
No.
So you would say, without putting sort of words in your mouth, and also the structure of world motocross, it doesn't really allow people to go and give it a go like we could, for example. You had to work to get on the grading list.
But there is a common misconception that you have to pay to be on a team, and I don't agree with that. And I'm sure you know better than me. Is like every team is looking for talent because they've got to keep the sponsors happy and they've got to go out and get results. You can't just get a couple of mid-pack paid guys and it's all going to go wrong. I know you're getting money from them, but that's not enough to keep the team going. So every team potentially, the factory teams are not going to have paid guys, I get, but like a support factory team, say for example, like, the Hitachi Milwaukee guys, they might have one paid guy, but they need a couple of good, players anyway. So it's not just a matter of you've got to pay and you can get a Grand Prix ride. They're all looking for talent.
The talent at the top of World Championship motocross now is, it's immense. It's amazing. It's great to watch. But the difference is in the privateers, because that really doesn't exist. Back in the day, you could be a privateer, and if you qualified for a GP, you made a couple of grand and you got to the next one. So
yeah, well, you could showcase your talents as well, because you might get a start and run up top 10 and everybody's, who's this kid?
Yeah.
And
yeah, you can't do that now as easily. I mean, there's always ways to showcase your talent, but not at the actual GPs.
Yeah, like cream always rises to the top. It just seems that the journey's been made harder to get to the top. I would say that, the opportunity to put yourself out there, and like you said, the GPs, the structure, even the British Championship, like you said, it was healthy because there was only one championship. You'd go there, it was the one to be at. And I mean, you live in California now and stuff like that. So I don't know if you still follow British motocross too much from over there, but certainly back when you were coming through, I mean, like you said, we had so many like really good talents, but we also had a real strong championship and we had amazing circuits. So do you think that's played a part in it? Because we've lost so many great circuits as well that certainly bring on riders' potential.
Yeah, there's a multitude of factors, I think, that have brought it on. I mean, at some of the other countries, France specifically, you mentioned, I mean, way back in the late 80s, early 90s, they started that academy, where the kids
we spoke to Sebastian about this.
Yeah, well, Sebastian was involved at one time. Jackie Vimond was the first one that was involved back in the day, and they had the kids in school that was like a riding school. Yeah. And, you saw what happened. We did none of that in this country.
No, and they really had some talent.
Yeah, and it's kind of followed through as well. And so a lot of the countries had just a better structure for bringing kids into the modern world. We had our structure started with that top 35, which was amazingly successful. Yeah. But then it was never modernized.
No.
Modernizing would have been to start, actually getting sponsors and bringing kids on by actually having them ride day in, day out. You see, I didn't ride day in, day out. I rode once a week. You can't do that now.
No, you have to be.
You've got to be on the track.
I don't think it's a shortage of money in the sport, because if you go to the practice tracks, they're full.
Yeah.
And I think people want value for money. And, you know, I don't think they're selling the volume of bikes like they used to, but it still seems like it's fairly buoyant. There's a lot of people got dirt bikes, but they're not that bothered about racing.
They're not bothered about racing, and there's so
They
many
want
options
to go wheeling
now.
down the side street more. So.
That's the point. Like, you know, I'm on about, like, there's so much choice to go racing. It's diluted all that talent, and like some riders will go, well, I'm not going to go and do that when I can go there and win that.
No.
So
And I will say, we're talking about the 500s being the premier class, but we got to give a shout out to your Jem Watleys and your Rob Herrings and your Andy Nicoll. There's a lot of good 250 guys.
There was as well.
And Alan Morrison on the 125s and Prattley and all these names. There was a lot of good guys, you know.
Yeah, no, there was in every class. Yeah, I mean, those riders you just mentioned as well. Yeah, I mean, they were the first really guys that rode 250s in the British Championship, in the main British Championship, and were competitive. And, you know, I mean, certainly Malin, Dobb, Herring, I mean, all of them won British Championship races when on their 250 against 500s.
Well, it's
in the
corner
80s.
speed, isn't it? You know, you're following them.
And it was as those 250s caught up and the 500s became difficult to manage.
And I think the 250s got developed more as well. You know, like an 02 CR250 is night and day better than the 500.
Yes.
Chassis-wise, it's a better bike. You know that.
Yep.
You know, and then they only went leaps and bounds from there.
Just to make a point on that highlights, I think, and I know Mark Chamberlain's current Motocross Nations manager wouldn't mind me saying this. Back in those days, we had a wealth of talent, and we were obviously the Americans dominated. We'll talk about how that came to an end, but
let's not forget that.
Let's not forget that. But we was always in a position where we'd be contenders. Like you know that we got a shout, we got a chance here. Of,
we were at least
Mark
podium.
has put a team together over the last few years where we've banged in a few podiums and whatever. But
it's been great.
We're not going into the Motocross of Nations anymore, I don't think, as like necessarily as like, okay, they're in with a real shout. Whereas in your generation, we had a wealth of talent to rely on, and we were contenders for that.
Yeah, very much
crown.
so.
We were certainly contenders against the other European countries.
Yeah.
Most of that 80s until 94, you weren't
What
really
happened in 94, Kurt?
I can't remember.
None of us can.
But the Americans
Got lucky.
were the ones that had three riders.
Yeah.
That was the difference. And
it seemed to mean to them to want. Now they don't seem bothered about it.
No, I mean, their season's extended
Oh
now
my
even
God.
further. And so, I mean, they're doing 17 supercrosses, they're doing 12 outdoors and then 3 playoffs.
Yeah, when I
get it.
When I did that season, and I was doing like Supercross 125, so I only did half of those. That's insane.
Yeah.
The
Well, I
workload
did
is
it for years
insane.
with KTM, and
It's
fly in, fly out, fly in, fly out. I mean, it never stops. And
Do you think it's too much? Do you think it's
it is too much.
do you think it's
We've been
actually
trying
too
to get Mitch Payton to come to Foxhill, and he's like, I don't want to get on a plane.
No, I think it's
For the rider in
it's
particular.
very difficult for the
Oh
riders.
my God! And you don't get any time to get over any little niggle injuries. You have a little tweak or something, and
This
you make
year's
it worse and
Supercross
worse
has
and
been
worse.
A little bit better because most people have stayed healthy, which is great. But it's an exception. You know, we get back to last year or the year before, and you're running with 3 of the top 10 left because of injuries, and that ruins the sport.
It does. It's not good.
Totally loses interest when that happens. So I do think it's a lot. But it certainly gets to the point where, well, if I don't have to do the Motocross of Nations and fly to wherever it is, I'm not going to.
No,
Yeah.
and it's a business, and the guys get paid per race, and they don't get paid to do that. And it's like asking a builder, just stick that wall up, because I think you can wear an England
And
shirt
there's-
while you're doing it. Who gives a shit?
$10 million on that playoff race. So, I mean,
You
it's
gotta do
$10
what you
million
got-
or you fly to
it's-
Matterley to ride for free.
And it's a short career. You got to make it count. And
That is a tough one. When you word it like that does absolutely sum it up.
No,
Like,
it
you
is.
can have all
It's
the
a-
pride of ride for your country and all that, but you can never escape the fact that money talks. And when you're talking about that much after a long season, that's
do what you got to do. No,
money in it. So
100%. And also another thing that a lot of people don't realize, which is the cost of getting some guys in. Now, I mean, if you got a factory KTM guy, the infrastructure's there to run him in a factory KTM rig in Europe. But if you've got something that's maybe they haven't got the infrastructure to get some guys over, it's horrendously expensive, and they end up working out of box fans and whatever, and it's just not.
Yeah, and the AMA, I don't know. They've never been super motivated to pay either. They put a basic together, but they also rely on help from the European factories to help the Americans. And if that's not for their best riders, and the best riders don't always come. So
No.
it's a shame, because I think the Motocross Nations absolutely needs a strong American team,
Yes.
the best it can. But let's see, hopefully,
Yeah.
Matterley.
See, without an American team, it is just like a poor Grand Prix, isn't it? I know it sounds terrible.
No, but we've said that before. You're right. They you can't argue the fact that they bring that to it. This whole competition over history. That 13-year win streak, all that. They definitely add more value to the Motocross of Nations. There's no denying that.
I feel like we've gone off piste.
Well, a little bit, but we can always pull it back. And that's what we do, Wobbs.
I know.
We don't have to actually talk about.
You will notice I'm not swearing. I've been told not to swear.
We're not going to necessarily talk about Kurt's career chronologically. We can always jump back to it, which is
right.
what we're
I'm
doing
just saying,
right
so
now.
You start. So when did you start Grand Prix? How many British? How old were you? How did that come around? Because you were straight away factory Kawasaki.
Yes, I rode Kawasaki the last year of schoolboy, or last few races of schoolboys, and then did whatever you had to do back then, get your junior points and your expert points and all of that stuff. And then my first British Championship year was 1983 on a Kawasaki, and then I started the same time. I did some Grand Prix as well.
Oh, so like first year out of schoolboys.
No, I came out of schoolboys in 1981, so I did like junior races for half the year in 81, and then expert races, then the support championship of the British Championship, which you have to do.
Yes.
And I won that in 82, and then went into the British Championship in 83.
That's mad. What was your youth career like? Just a learning curve? I mean, did you hit the ground running? Were you winning straight away? Were you
I
mid-pack?
was. No, I was winning straight away, which is miraculous, really, considering I didn't start riding at all until I was 12. But I think I won my second race. I had good genes.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, you had a good teacher, I'm sure.
And I'd watched riding ever since I was tiny. And so even though I had a terrible technique, if I look back, but somehow I could kind of get around.
Doesn't matter, does it?
And then develop from there.
You say terrible technique.
I don't ever remember you having a bad technique.
I certainly don't.
You should find some old schoolboy photos,
really?
and
Maybe
you
we
might
should,
see
maybe
we
it.
should,
Like I was
somehow.
a beginner that could twist the throttle, I think.
I don't remember. I mean, your riding style always looked very controlled, smooth.
That's what I'm going to say.
That's the best way I can describe your riding style.
Previous guests that we've had in, obviously, like Rob, we had Rob Heron in recently. Rob was very fluid. Like you always seem to be like absolutely muscling that bike and be, so you, just not overly flamboyant, but efficient, I think is the best way to describe your riding. Your riding, ridiculously efficient.
So I had a plan right from the beginning. I had a plan through my career of how it was all going to go, and it all went exactly how it was supposed to go, except I finished second 4 times instead of first. But everything else went exactly how I wanted it to go.
I just think you were unlucky when you were born. No offense, because you were born into what has to be the most competitive.
Yeah,
really, it was insane. When you look at the names.
I treated my riding. It was my job. It was a business. Like, it wasn't a game to me. I love riding. I still ride every day now, but it wasn't a game. I've right from the age of 18. I trained hard and I did motos. I mean, when you take someone like Rob, great rider, but I don't think he, treated it like a business. Maybe not until much later. It was.
No, he relied on
It was my job from the age of 18 years
talent.
old.
That's what I was going to ask you. Say you had a plan. When did that plan trigger in your head then? At what age? I mean,
As soon as I started, and it's ridiculous to say
right.
now.
So you didn't kind of get into it like thinking, okay, I love
I'm getting
what I
quite
do.
good at this.
Yeah. Oh, it's fun. I enjoy what I do. You absolutely straight away went, right. This is career. This is not.
Yep, I did. And if a kid came up to me now at 16 years old and said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and race world championships, and I'm going to be world champion and win British titles, I'd say, hey, you know how difficult that is, mate.
Yeah.
But that was always the plan, and I always had confidence that it was going to happen, and I worked really hard to make sure it did happen. So I was efficient. I wasn't flamboyant, because the most important thing to me was to win the races. So
yeah, I think when we talk about you said about the era, and up against like obviously DT and all the others.
Well, Malherbe, Carl Chris, Dawes, I mean, the names.
Yeah.
Are they big names to us? Do these kids look at these guys now and look up to them like we looked up to them? these the glory days for these kids.
Well, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah,
It would
will
be.
be. Yeah,
It would
absolutely
be.
will
But to
be,
us, when you first see car quests, you're like, fucking hell. but also the internet's got a lot to answer for. We've discussed this before. With now a lot of the kids, a lot you do feel, if you follow somebody on Instagram, you feel like you're their friend. Right. Whereas before, we didn't get very much media. And when you actually saw these guys, they were like giants amongst men. You were like, fucking hell, it's George Jobay. You know what I mean? It just would be a much, I don't know, maybe the star power's gone away a little bit. I don't know.
Did it feel like that, living through it? Did you feel like a superstar in those days?
Absolutely I didn't. And I've actually been surprised in recent years and taken back a little bit by how much influence what we were doing then had on people. Because honestly, I didn't. I felt like it was just my job, and I would go and ride, and I'd get a little bit of adulation, get some trophies, and win some money. I went home, and I had family, and we were completely into motocross. But no, I definitely didn't really ever feel like a superstar like that in any way.
No, I don't. Like I say, I think the effect that your generation had, we spoke about Thorpe, and the same with you with the big Kawasaki trucks, and all us goobers were stood outside peering in, watching Aaron and your brother working on stuff, and it's just, it was just it was just up there, it was like.
Yeah, I don't think we felt like that at all, because obviously it was attainable to us, but we were a motocross family, as you say. But my brother was my mechanic, Aaron, and Dad, and our family revolved around motocross.
Yeah.
But I don't think we ever really treated it like we were something different. We just liked going motocross racing and wanted to win.
So what do you think's changed now? Because now the family thing's not encouraged very much. Like with Carmichael, obviously his mum and dad were always there, but they were in the background a little bit. James Stewart's dad was always there, but it's not really encouraged to have once the kid gets a factory ride, you kind of want to push the parents out and let's get on with the job.
Well, the teams are much, much bigger now. Yeah. And so, you've got someone that does the engine, you've got trainers, you've got suspension guys, you've got someone that cleans the truck, someone that drives the truck. I mean, we were a unit.
Yeah.
And every rider had his own unit, even though you were in Team KTM when I was with someone like Jackie Martins.
Yeah, but you weren't a team really.
No,
on the same bike.
Or Rob Herring when we were on Castrol Honda or whatever. I mean, we had our own setup completely. So I mean, it wasn't like being a team. Where now it's a way bigger team, and I don't think parents really fit as well into teams.
I like that word.
No, but it's true.
That's a spanner in the works for a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean it is, and so it's not encouraged. Whereas back then, I mean, I was working for myself. I was self-employed motocross rider, and the best people to have around me was my family, because they're the ones that really care about you, and
really have
and
the
I
best
was lucky,
interest.
of course, to have a dad that knew everything about motocross and could steer me in the right direction, and a brother that was extremely talented with spanners, and so
it worked out well.
We just had everything going for us.
Yeah. You're a tight-knit family. Do you think, obviously I came into the latter part of your career racing British motocross, and it always felt like similar to the kind of vibe that Jeff Stanton used to give off. Like, you've already answered this. You were there to do a job. I guess people didn't really see the real Kurt Nicoll at the races. Like, you were so focused.
Oh, you were miserable looking.
Mm-hmm. I do.
It wasn't until I got to know you. It wasn't until I got to know you. I'm like, you know what? He's quite a nice bloke.
Yeah.
Because you look serious, and I'm like, I'm not even a fucking speak serious.
I'm still intimidated.
I think you've got a resting bitch face.
Yeah.
But if I could go back in time, that's the one thing that I would change.
Is it?
I am very, I'm very happy with everything that I've done through my life. Totally content, and I feel like I maximised my talent. I maximised everything I did. The one thing I didn't do is, give any joy to the fans or to the people around. And it was certainly not conscious. I was just focused on winning. I didn't realise
I don't know whether
had fans.
I think now it's much more important than it was back then, because you would only, if you wouldn't speak to the media now, you're vilified. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you have to
no one told me either.
No.
Back then you didn't really get told you're a miserable sod. Now, I mean, you imagine how I get killed on the social media now, and so I'd probably start smiling.
I mean, the one who I saw was working with Travis, as you well know. You know, like in the truck, he could be hurting and miserable and it's all gone wrong. Them truck doors open and he's got the biggest shit-eating grin on his face.
Yep.
And he is a consummate professional, that kid.
Well, yeah, but he's also a natural born entertainer and so personable. And as you know, because you know him very well as well, I mean, everything that you see on the outside, there's nothing manufactured about Travis. All completely
No. That's how he is.
And that's how he is.
The only thing that used to make me laugh, he said, "Don't give me all the posters, kid. I only want to sign this many." And then towards the end, people would be like, "Have you got any more?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I got tons in the van."
But he could take that as well.
Oh, he's golden.
Kid
And he'd
is
be the
amazing.
last at the track, wouldn't he? Last at the track. He wouldn't leave until the last person had got what they wanted.
And
He
he's
was
you know
so good.
very approachable. I just never felt like I wanted to be approachable. You know, I just
You were
wanted
there
to
for a
race.
job, and I understand that.
I'm still processing what you said. I'm amazed that you almost like you've said that's a regret.
That
you know?
is, it's the only regret I have because I feel like I could have done a lot more than I did. I just avoided that side of it. And I probably
Well, it was
shouldn't have
when
done.
I
Well,
worked with.
wish I did.
Did you ever notice it though with other riders? Did it ever creep into your psyche thinking, they're getting loads of people around their van, or at the time, did it ever pop in there?
It
You were that
genuinely
focused.
didn't.
You were just that's amazing.
I just wanted to go
And
out
win.
to the start line and win the race. And I'd do anything that helped that to do that. And speaking to other people in the pits, that wasn't going to help me to do that, and so I just didn't do it.
I do remember I was working for Rob Andrews. We were at Farley, must have been a British Championship, I guess. And I'm doing something to the truck, and I cannot remember for the life of me, trying to prime the pressure washer or something. And you've walked past, said hello, and wandered off in your extremely short shorts. I remember that.
Funny the things that you remember, wasn't it?
And you've come back and with a handful of ice cream to give me an ice cream. And I'm like, he's all right. I didn't get quite that miserable. And I don't know, it was mega, and I thought, maybe
You didn't tail it, he spat on it.
No,
I'm joking.
he licked it first. But no, fair dues. It was just like you didn't look like you were having any fun. And I know as a mechanic, you hear all these people go out and have fun. I'm thinking, how about you go out and earn your fucking money? Sorry, because I'm not having any fun. I got my hands in a parts washer on a
I actually
Tuesday.
was
must
having
have been
fun.
having fun.
Like I totally was. It was exactly what I wanted to do, and the fact that I still ride, as many days a week as I can now shows that I loved racing and still do, and I was having fun. It just was, what gave me the most fun was winning the races, and I did what I could to do that the best.
Well, you always looked like you would put everything into it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You never
I don't think
you
we
didn't
ever-
ride very well. You look like if you didn't get the result, wasn't for the lack of trying.
Yeah,
From the
tried-
outside, that's how it looked.
Yeah.
I was very consistent. I mean, I think sometimes, I know for sure that I was a little bit over-focused, and so sometimes I'd be a points counter. I'd be like, well, I think I'm better off I'll just stay third. I'll win the next race because I don't want to crash or I'll break the bike. I'll just stay where I am. I kind of...
And your
I
dad
think-
was a serious guy as well. Dad was a serious dude. From the outside looking in, I mean, he'd be there with the stopwatches. And he was the guy who used to sit in the lawn chair with Rob Andrews' dad. He was that old Dutch guy, Belgian guy. I can't remember his name. But you know exactly what I'm
Yeah, I
talking about.
know, Johnny Strybos.
That's him, Donny Strybos, yeah. And they'd all be there with the timesheets, and cause there wasn't any official timing at the time.
Yeah,
And,
no, that was
I'm trying to peek over your shoulder to see where we're at.
See,
I'm not-
things were better then.
I don't
they
know.
weren't they? Like
I
that
don't
whole
know.
thing
They
of
were
people
different.
taking data.
They were different.
I'm going to say better. I don't care. I'm going
But you were, like we, as the privateers, we'd travel from Grand Prix to Grand Prix, and you would fly home and come back in again. So I'd see Aaron and on the road, but I wouldn't see you. You'd be gone. You'd be home training and doing what you're supposed to do. Great, Same as Thorpe.
Yep.
Was there any part of the career at that stage that you detested? Part of the job that you didn't like?
No.
No.
I loved it all. I mean, obviously injuries.
Yeah.
And, I hated being at home and stuck with a leg in a cast. But apart from that, that was the only thing that I didn't like.
What about the testing side of things? Did that come naturally to you? I remember you being a good tester.
Yeah, it came. I don't know about naturally. I mean, I think test riding, as you know, you gain that. You have to do it. You do it to become a test rider. I still test 1 or 2 days a week for KTM on production bikes in the States. And it's the more you do, the better you get at it, because you have to keep changing things in order to know the difference. You can't just ride a bike and say, well, it's good or bad, and
No,
you've
it's
got
not
someone
good
else to compare it with.
No.
So I became a better test rider as time went on, and I still think I'm pretty decent now for testing for old people.
It's a big market, old people now. We all know that.
Yeah.
So, moving into the best parts of your career there, then, like, obviously you were in that era, you were racing with all those names we mentioned for the British title, but also you then started getting ever so closer to that world title. I always remember mostly, for me personally, it was, I think, Farley 87, I think, where you were riding number 7, I think.
That was
right?
the glory. They were the big
That's
days.
when
They
I
were the
thought, that's
glory
for
days.
me as a younger fan and looking up to all that generation in front of me. That's when I thought, okay, I can remember being there that day going, okay, he's getting there, like.
Yeah, that was the first
you
race
were-
I ever won.
Yeah.
And 87 was the first year. So I guess 84 I finished 8th. 85 I finished 5th when the first, and so I was making my way up. But then the last race of 85, the Motocross to Nations, I broke my leg, broke my femur, first lap
Yes,
of
really
practice.
badly. I remember that.
And so 86 was kind of, a bit of a recovery year, if you like. Like I finished 7th because I had number 7 on.
Yeah.
But, I wasn't
Still impressive.
making the,
Coming back from a big injury like
yeah,
that.
I just wasn't making the progress that I made the years before. And then I made the progress over that winter so that when I came out in 87, then I was way stronger than 86.
So the leg injury, dark times, because you were making, and that was a bad one.
It was a bad one. I remember.
So, I mean,
Bob Andrews told me the story. He was like,
The throttle jam, first lap of practice. Like I was only going up a straight, it just threw me off the back and went to walk off the track and my leg was pointing the wrong way.
was that Geldof?
Geldof.
Oh, you don't want,
Ground
that
was
is
rock
like,
hard.
like concrete.
yeah, that's not pleasant there.
God.
Yeah.
And fast.
Yeah. I mean, I loved the track. I rode really good there the rest of the time, but that wasn't a good day.
You see, I'd have thought you would have been more of a sand rider from where you're from the Cambridge area. And then it's very sandy over there. You got
No,
Chippenham and all that. I'd have thought that would have been
guess
your
kind of
forte.
sand. No, it definitely wasn't. I mean, it's the exact opposite. So I went to those first early years. I couldn't get very many points in the sand, really. I mean, I rode all right in it, but if I went to proper sand, like in Holland or something, then I was pretty lost. And I moved to Belgium. I had Johan Leuten was my mechanic in 87 with Aaron as like assistant mechanic the year before he became main mechanic. And so we moved to Belgium then, and we actually were going there because Johan was mechanic, but we actually had an apartment and we stayed in Belgium until 89.
You must have been one of the very first to do that.
Yeah, but that was at that time I did that to learn to ride sand.
Yeah.
And we did it, and it really improved me in 87 working with Johan. And then so when me and Aaron were there, we kept the apartment and we spent most of our time in Belgium at the end of the 80s as well.
How much your relationship with DT in particular, do you think that helped you? Because you had to take him on the domestic front as well. So that must have really helped with the progression, going into GPs, because you had that intense battles back in Britain every time. It wasn't like, you've not just with Dave, obviously, but we're on about the standards of British motocross. That must have really helped elevate your game, because there was an obvious rivalry between you two. There's no doubt about it.
No, there was, and that really helped me without question, because he was a little bit older than me, more established and world champion, and so I had something to aim at.
I want a piece of that.
Yeah, and so that it was great for me. The more I tried to beat him, and the faster I got. And once
So how many British championships did you win? Like adult championships?
I won 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. I won the first one. I tied on points with David, but he won in 87, and then I won the next years apart from the year I broke my leg.
Nice.
And
so what?
94.
Looking forward, we know you rode 250s, and you went from a Kawasaki 500, and next thing you're on a 250 Honda. What was?
I rode KTM in between that. I did 3 years on KTM.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Sorry.
500 KTM.
Yes.
And then the last year.
Now the mint green seats. That was the year. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so why switch? Why 250s? Why did you? Just a deal come along, or was it a conscious decision?
2 reasons. It definitely wasn't the deal. I could have made more money, and obviously I'd have been overwhelming favourite to stay in the 500s because Joe Bay retired, and Billy Lyles went to 250, so there was no one left from the top 3 from that year. But there was 2 reasons. One, I just finished second for the 4th time and lost the championship by 1 point in the 500. And I don't think that I could mentally face doing it again in case I didn't win.
I was going to ask that very question. Why? Because you had a great opportunity.
I did, but there's nothing guaranteed in the world, even though I'd have been overwhelming favourite, and I don't think I really had the motivation to do it again. And the 250 was taken over as the main class, and I still saw myself at that point absolutely as, one of the top riders in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And so I wanted to prove myself against the other top riders, and I felt like the 500 was becoming the support class.
Yeah.
And
That 250 of yours was trick as well, though, wasn't it? That was a really trick.
Yeah, but it was a conscious decision as well, a conscious business decision, as all of mine was, as a family, because Aaron actually stopped.
Yeah, Julie was
my
your
mechanic, and Julian was my mechanic on 250s. And I know how much work it's going to take, and I know what's going to be necessary, what is the best bike to go on. And obviously I was racing pretty much every week then against Rob Herring in the British Championship, and I could see how fast his bike was and how good it was. And so, the opportunity came up. I'll be honest, I think Castrol Honda took me on.
What year is this?
93.
93.
It was Neil Tuxworth and Bob McMillan and those guys, and I don't think...
It was full on HRC though, wasn't it? It was a factory.
It was a good bike, but I think they took me on in order to win the championship with Rob Herring.
Yeah.
They thought, well, he might not be that fast, but at least we'll get rid of him and he won't beat Rob anymore.
No.
It was I can remember it. It surprised a lot of people.
It was a big change.
Because what you just said.
You were a 500 guy through and through. 500.
Exactly. 500 guy.
Didn't even know you sat on anything else.
But on top of that, it's like, like you've just highlighted, he's got a chance to finally win this 500 crown. It caught a lot of people off guard. I mean, it didn't help my cause. I was like, oh, Christ.
Yeah.
I was in the 250 class that time. Brilliant. That's another place I'm further down.
It was a big move.
Suited me because I was with Billy Lyles on 500s that year, and I was like, fucking one more place we're going to have.
I was the opposite. Yeah.
No, it was a conscious decision. I totally believed that I could do it when not many people believed that I could. And I worked really hard at doing it as well. I mean, I never touched a 500 again.
Yeah.
Until
you were quick on that.
97 or whatever when I went back to 500. But those next 4 years, I mean, I actually rode a 125 a lot then as well, practicing just to get used to.
You're a big boy for 125.
I didn't know that. That's good to know, isn't it?
Yeah. Like the first winter I rode a 250, sort of the whole winter to get used to it. But the second winter I rode a 125 pretty much every week. Because
it gets your aggression up.
Yeah.
Just to keep your body English all over the bike. You've got to make it work, haven't you?
I'm going to ask a question that I'm sure you've been asked loads of times, but I've never heard the answer to it if you have been asked. Hawkstone and the whole gate drop incident with the, because that people still talk about
shocking,
that.
Wasn't it? That was a shocker.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You're obviously, like I said, we've
tell people what happened.
We've
not
obviously
everybody
worked out. We've worked out that you're focused on the job, very much so. So I'd hate to imagine what was going on under that crash helmet at that time. So
British Grand Prix.
Well, I'll let you explain what happened. You lined up for it was the second race or the first race? It was the second race, wasn't it? I can't remember. Either way, you're in a world. It sounds like you might have blanked it out. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up.
I think it was 3 races back then.
Oh, was
in
it?
92,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, So you talk about regrets. I mean, I could definitely regret that in hindsight. Everything that went on there. But at the time, it was different. I mean, so my start gate failed. It didn't drop. It didn't drop.
No.
But they pulled it back the first time because it didn't drop. But I lined up on the same. They tested the gate and it worked, and so I lined up at the same place.
And this was the best sorry to butt in. This is when it was the T-bars. For those of you who've never seen it, they dropped into the ground.
Yeah.
And so if they got anything in them, they would stick. And so I lined up there again, having seen it work, and it stuck again. And this time, they basically said they weren't going to stop it, and so I went around the gate and carried on, and I got myself up to about 12th, and then I crashed and went back out of the points, and then I pulled in. And in hindsight, of course, if I come back out and got back up to 14th, I'd have won the world championship.
That's why it's a killer question. That's why I'm like,
So yeah,
I was nervy about
I have
asking
no
that.
regrets, but yes, I
Yeah.
regret that now. And it was childish of me. I shouldn't have done that. I lost my.
So why did you pull out? Did you injure yourself in the
No.
crash? Just by
No,
that
I was
point,
just
the
had
redness,
enough.
the adrenaline
Gut
had
full,
gone. You were just pissed off.
I was totally pissed off they didn't pull the race back again because my gate didn't work. And
And there's photographic, there's pictures
yeah.
of you of all the gates down,
Well, I'll get
and
to
yours
that.
are still up.
So here's the next thing. So we actually protested it because there was film, and we took it to the FIM.
Yeah.
And they actually
How'd you argue
agreed
that?
with us.
Well, you
and
can't
they
argue with
said, we agree, but we're not changing the race, and we can't take photographic evidence. So what I've decided to do now, because they can check the thing, is I'm going to go back again, try and get the championship. Because you can do it retrospectively.
Yeah.
So we're going to we'll sue the FIM.
Rubens Barrichello.
You could still. This is brilliant.
I'm going to try and win it. Yeah, we're
Try and
thinking
win it.
about it.
Yeah.
As long as you get the bonus.
Because we can prove now that the film's legit.
Yeah,
whereas
I mean-
back then you couldn't.
Hasn't been tinkered with. But
No,
I remember
I'm
seeing
joking.
pictures of all the gates down and yours not.
No,
And I'm just like...
it was
and
one of
like,
those things.
Did you hit it? If you say you didn't, you
No,
didn't.
no,
You know
I
what
definitely
mean?
didn't. There's no question.
But if you hit it, you wouldn't be pissed off at them.
No, if I hit it, then I'd pull back
It's
and
a
it would drop
mistake.
down and then I'd go around it. I
Yeah,
mean, that
it's a
happens in my
mistake.
life. Of
Yeah,
course,
but-
everyone hits the gate
course you
sometimes,
do.
but not that day. But,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things. A long time. I didn't sleep for 10 years, but I'm good with it.
Oh no, I'm starting to feel real bad now about bringing that up.
No, but if that was, you should
But I
have won a
wanted
world
to ask. I've
championship.
always
No,
wanted to
no,
ask
it's
you
a
that.
big
Yeah,
deal.
no, I'll ring my therapist
thing is-
now. I can get back in, I think.
Well,
It wasn't just you though. Trust me, the whole place was gutted. We were all stood there giving it.
yeah.
And I know you didn't think we had much of an effect, but we're all pissed off. Mm-hmm. We were all pissed off with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it affected me longer into that year, to be honest. I didn't ride well the next GP because I just think mentally it got to me. And then the crankshaft broke in one of the races in France. So, I mean, I went from leading the championship going into Hawkstone to being almost 40 points behind going into the last 3 rounds. And then I won every race in the last 3 rounds. And got
But
to
that's
be
got to
in
be
1
as well,
point.
with the crankshaft breaking, a confidence issue. Because I remember the Kawasaki's were that.
Thorpe said about
Thorpe said about
when
it.
he
and
went
they were
to
chocolate.
Kawasaki. Yeah,
They were chocolate rods,
Yeah,
weren't they? And it was
a
like,
little different, those connecting rods. I mean, it would have scared me. Mine was a one-off. I can't remember what broke now, but I didn't lose any confidence. I mean, we had the KTM guys that worked for me back then. Obviously Aaron did the bikes, but the engines were done at KTM, and those guys were excellent. And I didn't have any. It just,
things fail.
things fail. They fail now, not very often, but back then, I mean, they did.
I do tell that to people now. I said, look, being a mechanic in the 80s and 90s was harder than it is now because these bikes are so reliable.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they
They're
are.
so reliable. And back in the day, shit would fall off them and you're like, that was tight. And it was. And it
well,
was. They were harder to work on.
Riders like I used to look after my own practice bikes most of the time because, like you say, you saw Aaron at the races. I was practicing back home, looking after them myself. I mean, I could barely keep them going for a few weeks, and then you'd have to change them. Whereas
fucked.
nowadays, I have a stable of about 15 bikes. All I do is change the oil, and they just keep running.
And they
running
do,
and
yeah.
running.
And like you can get a box stock 450 sticker. A slightly better. You can even make the stock suspension work good now because the components are so good. Whereas back in the day, after that was junk, you couldn't use it.
Yep.
Wouldn't dream of using it with standard bar, standard chain, standard. No, wouldn't dream of it.
No, well, things changed a lot with the production rule.
Yeah.
But so when I first started GPs, there was 10 factory bikes, and if you didn't have one of those 10 factory bikes, then you were racing for 11th place.
Yeah.
And that was how it was.
Well, that was also going back to the question about testing. Factory bike's only good if you can test it. If you can't give the feedback and you don't know, you almost bet on a production bike, aren't you? Because the production bike's made for your average man.
But
Whereas a
nowadays,
factory bike,
the
they've got
gap between a
everything.
production bike and a factory bike is so small.
Yeah.
Like even production, suspension, everything. If you put, whoever you like, Jeffrey Hurling's on a completely production bike, gave him 2 weeks to set it up properly, he'd go the same speed.
Yeah.
There's just not much difference.
No. And like I say, suspension used to be, if you didn't have factory stuff, you weren't in the game.
You
If you didn't
couldn't
have
play.
have A kit stuff, now you can make stock stuff work.
That was the thing, wasn't it?
Yep.
The big difference.
And it wasn't that long ago that kit stuff was the essential purchase. Now,
No, you can take it or leave it, absolutely.
no,
Like, so the
stuff runs.
production rule changed everything. You only got to look at, like, for example, when we had Dave in talking about his bikes in 85 and 86, and how clearly.
But just because it's a factory bike doesn't mean it's better. We all know that as well, because some of the stuff they get you to test, you're like, who the fuck? Who thought this was a good idea? You know what I mean? Some of it's...
No, I've had some real junk over the years.
Yeah.
Supposed factory stuff.
No, but it is. You're just like, I remember at Suzuki and one of the engineers had put the brake caliper directly underneath the fork because of the weight. And I'm like, hasn't it occurred to you it's going to catch in a rut? And it wasn't. And I'm like, well, surely I'm not the first person to clock this.
No, I mean, back then the Japanese were a long way in front of the Europeans, but mainly just through numbers rather than expertise. You know, I had great engineers at KTM that were super smart, but I always said that one Austrian engineer was probably worth 10 Japanese engineers. But when you went to Japan to test for, when I went with Honda and Kawasaki, they had 50 engineers that were there testing, where at KTM we went with one person and we had a week to make our bike and we didn't have money enough to do anything else. So then we had to come home and we were done. And you went to Japan and, I mean, they were testing every day, which is now what happens at KTM.
Yes.
But back then it was a Japanese thing.
It's a budget thing as well, you know that.
Yeah.
We can't at least finish this episode. Obviously, we said you got no regrets.
We've come up with a couple.
Close. Came up with a couple. We came up with a couple, but one of your, and for us as a country, obviously one of your greater moments was that incredible ride at Roggenburg in 1984 for the Motocross of Nations. 94, yeah.
What a weekend.
Yeah. Now, I just highlighted how we always were in contention, but everything just...
What happened that weekend? What was different?
So there was a few things that were new, and Dave Thorpe actually was team manager then, and that was new. I mean, I think he did it in 93 as well, but 93 and 94, he kind of engineered more of a kind of a team spirit there that made a big difference, I think. But we just had everything come together. You know, I don't think anyone...
Oh, it's a strong team. You, Malin, Heron and you.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been an advocate
right there
for Motocross Nations to pick riders that could potentially do it rather than picking riders that you kind of know what you're going to get. So, because there was a lot of controversy then, because I wasn't riding 500s, I was riding 250s. And so I remember Merv Anstey, you know, was the best 500 rider at the time. I think he won a GP when a few people boycotted it, but we could have picked him, and Merv was a great rider, but, you know, Merv would have been 6th or 7th, and then as soon as you have one rider that's 6th or 7th, then you can't win the event.
No.
So they picked me for the 500 and Paul for the 125, and he had a great bike from Rinaldi, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And so all three riders were at the front, and that was the first time it happened to a European team for 13 years, where all three riders performed on.
And like
day.
America sent a good team as well. It wasn't like they sent like a second rate.
They were
players.
gutted.
Yeah, no. And we had Rob Herring on the couch, and he said that, you know, like you come over the line and they're all lifting you off the bike, and he rode around giving it, I'm part of the team as well. he was.
Yeah, I mean, Rob did his job though. I mean, that first ride that he had when he finished second, and he was leading for a while. I mean, he absolutely did his job. To be honest, he didn't need to do that last race. When I went to the start line for the last race,
Because you hadn't dropped a race at that point, had you?
No, we hadn't dropped a race. And so I knew that if I finished in the top 3 of the 500 class, that we would win the Motocross Nations. And I knew.
So your confidence on that line.
100%. And
so pressure must have been off the scale.
I had no pressure.
No, you didn't feel
no pressure. I knew
you were that confident.
I knew that I was going to get top 3. Like, I was good at Roggenburg, and, you know, I'd ridden well without ridden great in the first race, but I rode well enough, you know, to finish behind Larocco and Demaria. But, you know, there was no one else that gave me any fear, and I knew I could beat Larocco, actually. Demaria could have, if he'd a whole shot, he could have cleared off again, but it wouldn't have mattered. I'd have been 2nd or 3rd, and I knew I was going to be 2nd or 3rd. So Rob had done his job, in the first race.
And Malin rode well.
Malin did. He was the big difference, because no one expected him to win both 125s.
No, exactly. And Emig didn't know who he was or where he came from. And it really, I mean, Emig, I'll tell you, it properly took him off his game.
Yeah.
His head was gone.
That was the big difference, was Malin, to be honest, because I guess at the time you would expect that I could finish top 3 in the 500 class, and you would expect that Rob could get one result, because that's how he was in the 250 class.
You didn't expect.
But you didn't expect Paul to win.
To do.
Both
But he had one of those days, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those days he couldn't do anything wrong. Fair
But
play to
he
him.
followed it up, because he became a great 125 rider after that.
Yeah, very much so. We need to get Malin
Obviously,
in.
yeah,
if we can
we
afford
do.
him, can we?
obviously that's a team event. So did it feel different to win something as a team rather than an individual at that time?
Yeah, and I think Dave Thorpe can
And the
take some
pressures also.
credit
Were they
for that. I never felt too much pressure in Motocross the Nations, to be honest. Again, there's a lot of, now that I'm a fan, you know, I actually really want the British team to do well, and so I feel like there would have been pressure, but because I never noticed fan pressure, I didn't really feel fan pressure, and it didn't matter as much to me.
Well, maybe that not speaking to him worked out in your favour then.
Yeah, well, it did. I didn't feel that pressure.
But if it didn't get in your head, I mean, I can't imagine you sat on the line for the last race at the Nations thinking, we got this in the bag.
I totally
And I mean, how would your head not go?
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
the exact opposite.
Was it really? That's amazing. Like, so it must have been a really good vibe in the
Mega.
camp as well. Do you think by having a rider of like your relationship with Dave, all of your relationship with Dave, and him having been team manager, did that add a slightly different dynamic than somebody that wasn't a racer at that level?
Yeah. Oh, it did. It changed the team, and you saw the results change as well. I mean, 93, we rode really well. 94, we won. Obviously, 95, we all rode really well. I mean, David, you know, he was good at that job. You know, David was good at bringing everyone together and did the job a little bit differently. And I think the ACU respected him, obviously. Why wouldn't you? And so they gave him the tools to do it as well, which we hadn't really had before. It always been a bit amateurish. It was much more professional when David was there.
When you obviously put an end to the 13-year streak, and we are going to keep banging on about it because it's like us winning the World Cup in 1966. So we're just going to keep banging that drum. That must have been sweet, walking around the paddock after that, just seeing, like you said, the look of disappointment and being the country that put an end to that streak.
Yeah, and I think we had a lot of support from the other countries as well. You know, back then, you know, you just wanted the Americans.
It was
to
the
get
world
beat 'cause
versus
we were
America.
sick of it. You know, and like I said, we'd started to get closer. I mean, I quite often we were talking about what the internet does and you know, social media. Well, the first time I went to the US, I went the week before the Carlsbad Grand Prix in 1984. And I went to a local race the weekend before, and Rick Johnson and Ron Lachine were riding, and I'd never seen them ride.
No.
And as they came to the corner where I was standing, I thought their throttles had jammed. They were so fast. And whereas now, you know, they had a completely different riding style through the 70s, and then in the 80s they perfected it with Supercross. We didn't know. Now, you know, if someone does something tomorrow in America, every kid's practicing it an hour later because they've seen it on social media. But back then, actually, there was a difference between the way they rode. And so it took a long time for Europe to catch up.
Yeah. Catch up we did, though.
Yes, and it's ever
Starting
since.
in 94.
I think that's all we've got time for, this one.
In this one, Kurt, thanks for your time. We are not going to finish there, though. We're going to get Kurt to carry on, and we're going to do a second episode.
Plenty more to talk about.
Plenty more to talk about. So we'll wrap this one up there. Thanks to Talon.
Of course, we haven't mentioned Talon
And of course,
yet.
they're still doing the 15% discount. So if you get hold of Talon, you either ring them up, go on their website, email them, and if you just, what's the code? I can't remember what it is.
Torq Moto 15.
Torq 15, isn't it? They're all going over there. Torq 15. Yes, sorry, I forgot. So you got
While
to do
we're
that.
talking about Talon, Simon, can you send my wheels, please? I'm trying to build the Andrew Short bike. So if you could.
Yeah, obviously we're all over social media, so follow us on that. If you've got any questions, if you want to email them in, the email is info@torqmoto@gmail.com. Also, there you are. You've been told to wrap up talking about Foxhill. And
Foxhill
Farley.
Farley tickets, get yourself round up, get them in. But no, Farley, we're pushing because we need to get it back to what it used to be. Foxhill, we're not shitting you. If you don't get your tickets, you might not get in. It's that busy. So I don't want to run you down the garden path. If you don't buy a ticket, there's a very good chance you won't get in.
And not just that, not just the race and everything else that's going on. Of course, we're going to be doing some Torq Moto.
We're doing some
live
podcasts. We're doing
so
podcasts.
That's worth the admission fee.
Maybe we can get Kurt back on the couch.
Yeah, in front of a rowdy audience.
Yeah, I think so.
That you will be part of. That's the good thing about that. We do the podcast and we get out amongst it, Wobbs. You can have some more beers.
I'm going to be smashed doing the podcast.
Brilliant.
I'll have to edit it out.
Right. We'll wrap this one up here. Keep liking and subscribing, and we'll be back with the second part of the Nicoll interview sometime in a couple of weeks.